Hello snowboarders of the internet, I am your host TC and today I will be reviewing the Nitro Team Pro Marcus Cleveland edition. This board is equipped with Nitro's true camber profile. So what that is that's going to be camber from the tail to the nose or the nose to the tail, depending on how you want to look at it. It's just a classic full camber snowboard. So what that's going to give you is all that load, drive, and pop that you're looking for. This board is going to come in a 152, a 155, a 157, and a 159. I rode this board at Copper Mountain where it was a beautiful sunny day. The bottom half of the mountain was nice and soft. Honestly, when we first got there, it was that hero snow where you could still lay an edge into it and you would pretty much feel a firm base underneath that you could trust. And like towards the end of the day, I would say it definitely got softer where it was that mashed potatoes like your grandma makes on Thanksgiving, that sort of thing. But once you got to the top of the mountain, actually, it was pure winter where it was really hard, wind blown, all of that. Pretty much you could just open your jacket and use it as a sail to go down the mountain. I used my Ride Fuse boots and Jones Mercury bindings. The overall flex of this board is gonna be stiff, but that being said, it does have like a reverse flex pattern to it where even though you do have that full camber nose to tail, this middle section is actually gonna be softer than the nose and the tail are. So torsionally flexing this thing when you need to foot steer it, approaching a rail or anything like that, it's not gonna be as bad. But if you land a little back seat when you go to like really press into this thing, you're gonna notice it quite a bit. So when you are flexing into this board, it flexes more in the middle than it does in the nose and tail. And that'll directly translate into how stable this thing is. When you're hauling ass, you don't feel that nose chatter or anything like that. There really isn't a speed limit on it. And when it's icy or slushy, it feels stable. On those push piles of that wet, nasty stuff, it just skipped right across it. I really didn't have to do much, get low where I was feeling bounced around or anything like that. It honestly felt really good. On that hard pack up at the top of the mountain, it held its edge extremely well and I didn't have to worry about it getting bounced around or sliding, not being able to grip. When you're loading this thing up to ollie, you'll notice since that tail is stiffer and it is that full camber board, it's gonna take more to load this thing up. That being said, what I have learned from Nitro's true camber, when you have it on like a park board, that sort of thing, is it springs. This thing really has a good pop to it, so when you load it up, it might take a little bit more, but it's gonna return that tenfold, or so it feels. It feels very stable on the takeoff and the landing, and I mean, that goes hand in hand with how it handles on jumps as well, where you can really get on the edge. When you're ready to spin, you don't have to pop if you don't want to. As you guys know, I like popping, get a little bit extra air time there, so either or, it's gonna work for you. And it feels really stable on those landings as well, where when you land a little tail heavy on it, it's gonna bring you right back and it's not gonna allow you to really wash out too much unless you're all the way back on that tail. If you're enjoying this video, or if you're not anyways, like, subscribe, click that bell, and turn on those notifications. That way you don't miss any of the programming we have coming out. As I've mentioned before, this tail is stiff, so when you go to butter on the tail or even the nose, they have the same stiffness, so it doesn't matter, but they're both gonna be pretty tough, where it's gonna fight you that whole time. This board would rather flex in between your feet, so even as you're leaning back or leaning forward on it, this thing wants to stay pretty flat, and that middle kind of wants to bend just in the slightest. Just expect a fight, but if you do get it to press, it is gonna spring you out, so keep that in mind. It really wants to pop out. And that's how it feels on rails too. So when you're going to press or butter on a ledge or a rail, it's gonna fight you. When you land on this thing in the middle of your feet, sliding sideways, it does feel better. It does allow a nice little flex around the rail, where if you land on the nose or the tail, expect to kind of get shot off to the side. Now, I will say, definitely come into the rails with speed on this board. It's just gonna make your life that much easier where you're not trying to muscle this burly thing around. This board actually carves really well for it being that park-oriented all-mountain board where you can really lay into your edge on this thing and trust that it is gonna hold you from that icy condition to that soft slush. It's gonna hold. When you do go over those push piles at high speeds, you might feel it getting a little bit skippy, but you can still trust that edge and know that you're just gonna plow right through it. I got this thing to lay over for a Euro carve a little bit too much, I'll say, where my toes definitely dug into that wet slush, but since this thing was stiffer, it just pushed right through. When I came out, I looked down and there was 2 trenches, one from my boot and one from this board, and I was just laughing because of how much power this thing actually has when you're carving. Rider in mind. This board is designed for that aggressive, definitely technical rider where they like to go all mountain. They like to go in the park, they just don't want to be exclusive to the park. They really like to take everything with speed, go hit all of those big features, find all of that giant transition, and pretty much just absolutely destroy the mountain. If you're looking for another way to get involved, head on over to Angry Snowboarder VIP. What is it, you ask? Sure, I could explain it here, but we have a great video over there getting into it really in depth. I really enjoyed this board. It felt very similar to the Beast for me, where the only difference is the Beast had that definitely fluid stiffness from nose to tail. This one has that little bit of a softer midsection, which I really liked. It didn't force me to be super aggressive all the time. I could take a run off here and there and just kind of relax on it and not have to be like balls to the walls or anything like that. But it holds up well, super fun on jumps and transitions. Like, it definitely rips all mountain too, so like, don't think that it's just a park board because it's Marcus Cleveland's. You can go rip this thing anywhere and have a good time. Comparable boards, the Rene-Gade, the Ride Algorhythm, and the K2 Antidote. Recommended bindings, the Nitro Team Pro, the Jones Mercury, and the Rome Cleaver. This has been my review of the Nitro Team Pro Marcus Cleveland edition. If this sounds like the board for you, but you just aren't sure of the bindings to put on, go check out Avran's review of the Nitro Team Pro binding, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.